Hi everybody, welcome to Dynamo Sword Channel. I'm David, and today on Dynamo Sword Channel, I will be reviewing the new Balaur Arms Teutonic arming sword. This sword is the new model produced by Windlass Steelcrafts that was released earlier this year. So, how does this model compare to other arming swords on the market as well as the original model? Well, stay tuned and we'll find out. The Balaur Arms Teutonic arming sword gets its namesake from the Teutonic Order of the medieval period. Founded in 1191, the Teutonic Order was initially a branch of the Knights Hospitaller, which saw its beginnings after the capture of Acre. Primarily a Germanic order, the Teutonic Knights, much like the Templars and Hospitallers, were formed to provide aid and protection to the Christian pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land, as well as establish hospitals. Their first founded hospital was in Acre, which they overtook and renamed the Hospital of St. Mary of the German House in Jerusalem. Later in 1211, the order moved to Transylvania, where they helped guard the Baltic regions from the Turkish and Kipchak invaders. The Teutonic Order is even still active today, with its modern station being that of a religious charitable institution headquartered in Central Europe. This sword is what would be described as a Type 12 in the oakshot typology. What defines the Type 12 is a broad, moderately tapering blade with fuller reaching between a half to 3/4 inch of the blade's length, and then ending in a more acute tip. This blade type seems to have been developed in the later 10th century, and these swords were an evolution of the earlier Type 10 and 11 blade types, reducing the fuller and giving the blade body more taper, ending in an acute tip to promote thrusting while still having enough body to retain cutting capability. This makes the Type 12 the first cut and thrust focused blade type of the medieval period and influenced the more prominent cut and thrust blade types of later centuries. Overall, the Type 12 is considered the quintessential knightly sword by many scholars, historians, and sword enthusiasts due to its immensely popularity throughout the continent of Europe for nearly 3 centuries, as well as being the precursor to the evolution of the medieval sword to a prominent cut and thrust blade profile. Next, let's look at the overall statistics of this sword. So its overall length is 38 5/8 of an inch. The weight is right at 2.5 pounds, and it has a point of balance right at 6 inches from the hilt. The center of percussion is 21 inches from the hilt, and the class of sword is what would be known as an arming sword. Now the blade's length is 32 3/4 inches long. The blade width at the base is 1 7/8 inch, and that tapers down to 1 inch at the tip. The material is a 1075 high carbon steel, and the finish is a nice satin polish. The cross section is lenticular, and it does have a fuller reaching 3/4 of the blade's length. The blade type again is what would be known as an oakshot Type 12. Now the guard's total length is 9 1/4 inches. The quillion dimensions are 3/8 by 3/8, and that swells to 1/2 inch and tapers to 1/8 of an inch. The material is a mild steel and the finish is a nice satin. The guard style is what would be known as a style 5 guard in the oakshot typology, but of a more thinner variety. The handle's total length is 4 1/8 inch. The circumference at the base is 3 3/8 inch, and that tapers to 3 inches at the pommel. The handle material is wood core, and the grip material is a nice dark brown leather with a 5 riser configuration. The pommel's total length is 1 1/4 inches. The pommel's width is 3 1/8 of an inch, and the pommel thickness is 1/2 an inch. The material is a mild steel and the finish is satin, much like the guard. The hilt construction, as you can see, is peened. And the pommel type is what is known as an oakshot type N in the oakshot typology. Now the scabbard is wood core with a leather overwrap in dark brown to match the grip. It features a rain guard at the mouth and a steel chape, as well as a 4 riser configuration to help support a frog or belt suspension system. Overall, this is a very well made scabbard and fits the sword well with very little to no rattle and a very strong friction fit. Overall, this is a finely made sword with a strong attention to detail. The sword is very symmetrical in design, and I have found no apparent fit and finish issues. The blade is nicely forged, straight and even, with no twists or blemishes. The polish is a nice satin and evenly finished. The fuller is broad and deep and tapers slightly towards the tip of the blade. The cross section is a proper lanicular cross section, and the profile termination is moderate and tapering, ending in a broad, acute point. I know the flexibility of these new Balaur arm swords has been a concern, but as you can see here, this blade is quite rigid and there is no whippiness to the blade. The guard is finely cast and has a nice satin finish like the blade. It is thin and long and is a good representation of an earlier, thinner variant of the Style 5 guard. Now, some of you may have been thinking that this was a Style 1, but when you look at the termination of the quillions and the thinner middle that swells out to the bow tie, you'll see this guard style is more of that bow tie Style 5 than the more straight Style 1. The guard is very symmetrical and there are no sharp edges to the guard itself. And the tang shoulder sits flush with the tang and in the tang slot. It looks like they did put some contact cement or epoxy, but overall, I would still say, as far as its fit and finish and general shape, a very nicely crafted and finished guard. The handle is also of a nice shape and has a nicely textured dark brown leather wrap with a 5 riser configuration. The seam is finished via skeeve and terminates well and is solid with no movement or fraying. The steel style's finish is still, though, a little concerning, as that is where my old Balaur arm sword had a failure, as the skeeve wasn't finished properly and peeled up after extensive handling. This one doesn't seem to have that issue and does seem to be finished better and is much more solid and slim and even with the butt. As I mentioned earlier in the review of the new Balaur Arms 13th to 14th century longsword, I don't believe these grips have an undercord, and the grip is just exterior texture. Overall though, a nicely finished and comfortable handle to use and wield of a nice slim ovular shape. The pommel though is really the centerpiece of this sword and has a nice satin finish like the guard. It is of the unique type N, which is described by Oakeshott as boat-shaped, or more like, I guess you could say, a half moon. This is a rare type and is not seen on many historical examples, with most representations being seen on effigies and in art. The pommel itself is finely cast and set flush to the grip. There are no blemishes or marks, and the pommel itself is very symmetrical in shape. The peen is finished well, but is not blended, as is the norm for most windlass made swords. In the hand, the pommel is quite comfortable and comparable to other wheel pommels, as in itself it's somewhat a large wheel pommel just cut in half. Overall, a very attractive and unique pommel type, especially in the budget production market. The scabbard is another highlight of this sword. It is shaped well and fits the blade perfectly with no rattle and has an excellent friction fit. Honestly, this is the best fitting production scabbard I've ever owned, and it is a real step up from my previous Balaur Arms, Hanway, or Windlass medieval scabbards. As far as handling goes, this sword feels great in the hand and is easy to use one-handed and in transitions with various forms and stances. The balance is great and offers much cutting, to cutting, and is agile enough to perform adequate thrusts. The sword is also sound and durable, and there are no loose parts or fit and finish issues. As mentioned before, the flex on this blade is leveled, eliminating any assumption or speculation of the blades being whippy like previous models. Overall, this sword handles great and is comfortable to use. But of course, I will go into more detail on the handling and function of the sword later in the follow-up cutting review, after I've had more time to use the sword as well as sharpen it for the cutting session. In conclusion, I am very impressed with this new Balaur Teutonic arming sword. It handles, looks, and feels like a historical Type 12 should, and has one of the best fit and finishes I've ever seen on a reproduction medieval sword, especially at the sub $300 price tier. I highly recommend you go and get yourself one of these new Balaur Teutonic arming swords if you are looking for a solid and unique replica of a historical Type 12 arming sword with a historically accurate blade profile, cross section, and hilt configuration, or just a durable and well-balanced early period cut and thrust arming sword. If this is what is in store for us regarding the new Balaur Arms model swords, I am very excited to see what other models they have available in the future. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review of the new Balaur Arms Teutonic arming sword. Be sure to like and subscribe, as well as look forward to the cutting review with follow-up discussion. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.